Jerry McHugh Jr., San Juan Resources. Welcome to this month's Improving Our San Juan IQ, and thanks for joining in on our call. Starting off, I am so pleased to have as our San Juan IQ guest today, Jason Sandel, Aztec Well Servicing Company, Aztec Family Well of Companies, where he serves as Executive Vice President. Third generation family company in the San Juan Basin. Jason's grandparents started Aztec Well Service with workover and swab rigs. Jason's a leading oil and gas champion for New Mexico and the San Juan. Jason has served in the Farmington City Council, chair of the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and the New Mexico Methane Advisory Panel. He is currently member of the New Mexico Economic Recovery Council, co-convener of the New Mexico Energy Transition Committee, and chair of the Western States Tribal Nations Gas Initiative. I'm pleased to say that San Juan Resources has contracted with Aztec to drill wells in the past when we drilled vertical Dakota Mesa Verde wells in the early 2000s. There's one of them there. It feels like it's a previous life when we drilled strictly vertical wells. So welcome, Jason. It's great to have you join this month's San Juan Rundown. I appreciate you taking the time. Sure, I've been rolling up your sleeves in New Mexico to get things done for our industry. And I want to encourage everybody here on the San Juan IQ, like we had last month. We had Chris Wright, a contagious advocate for the business, for our industry. So I encourage everyone to continue to be in that regard. First off, we're coming off this self-induced economic shutdown due to the pandemic. We've had a change of national government, which appears to be hard left. Everything is viewed through the lens of climate change. I think how they fund art is probably viewed through climate change. But it's not like it was a landslide left. Country is still severely divided, and most of us, as we discussed in the call earlier, are moderates. Since January, our industry has had serious policy constraints, stonewalling, and the federal government has put this on us. And now the state of New Mexico has done the same thing too, as the state has gone hard left. Federal regs, the rhetoric is to push this industry so far from getting anything done that we don't have the ability to conduct our business. So I don't know if that's a very good intro, Jason, but what are your thoughts about my intro there? And then we'll proceed.
You know, Jerry, I think that you're spot on. I think that as I like to think of it, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And so if our politics moved hard to the right, then it's not a great surprise to me that then our politics have now swung hard to the left. And you're exactly right. You know, the impact on our industry is probably the most significant impact of any industry in the United States. And so how it is that we're addressing those pendulum swings is going to be significant for us moving forward as an industry.
Well, you had a journal, Albuquerque Journal op-ed on March 17th, actually St. Patrick's Day, which I thought was very encouraging. You mentioned you're a Democrat and you employ hundreds of workers, 25 per rig with multipliers of 4 or 5 times. I wholeheartedly agree with this important piece of employment. We in our office and in our city here, we have families and landmen and just so many important people which run this business and essentially run the energy of this country. So I mean, you introduce, it's kind of like to Deb Haaland, what's the Interior Secretary doing cutting New Mexico jobs with these kinds of policies? Last I was on your day rigs or drilling rigs or service crews, there was a high number of Native Americans, Navajos with excellent paying jobs in the service companies too. So contributing to the New Mexico economy. So, I mean, I think they say that for a lot of us in this business, it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts through regs and stalling. So how do you respond to this independence frustration with the direction our governments are heading? How would you respond?
Well, I think I've got a great presentation that we can run through that offers some thoughts on what we as an industry can do to respond. And really what it comes down to is promoting that we do things in a responsible manner, and we do produce our fuel, which is a much needed fuel across the US and the globe. And we do so in ways that people probably don't know the care and concern that we take to do it right. And so we've got to do a little bit of selling ourselves and promoting ourselves to go out and talk about the good things that we do. And I think it starts there, Jerry.
Okay. Do you want to jump into your presentation now, or do you want to, why don't you go there, and then we'll talk about some of the federal things that we just have found out here recently, and we'll delve in deeper.
That sounds great to me. I'm going to bring up my desktop and do a share, and let's see if I can't throw this presentation up on the screen. Is that something that you can see?
No, I can see it fine. Yes.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to bring you this presentation from the perspective of the Western States and Tribal Nations Natural Gas Initiative. And just to start, you gave me an incredible intro, Jerry. I really appreciate it. But I do serve as the chairman of the Western States and Tribal Nations organization. I serve as a convener for the Energy Transition Act Commission, which is dedicated toward diversification of the economy here in the San Juan Basin based upon the Energy Transition Act passed in the state of New Mexico. I've been on the Governor's Economic Recovery Council for the past 14 months. I also serve as an advisory council for the Roosevelt Project. These experiences combined really kind of come together in this conversation about how it is that we can sell the fact that we are responsibly producing natural gas and oil across the Rocky Mountains. How can we prove it to the communities in which are impacted, and what is it that we can do to further our endeavor to continue with this responsible production. So first, I want to talk real quickly about Western States and Tribal Nations, what it is. It's a bipartisan transnational initiative led by sovereign tribal nations, states, and counties. And we're focused on rural economic development and advancing tribal self-determination by reducing global emissions through the export of clean natural gas from Western North America basins to international markets. So that's a mouthful, Jerry. But at the end of the day, Weston is a group of states and tribal nations who have come together to promote the export and the consumption of Rocky Mountain natural gas. I mean, that's really what our focus is. Our current membership is Blackhawk Energy, which is a Hickory Apache Nation company, the state of Baja, Mexico, or Baja California in Mexico, the state of New Mexico, the Southern Ute Indian tribe, the state of Utah, the state of Wyoming, the Ute Indian tribe out of Utah, and 4 Western Colorado counties of Garfield, Mesa, Moffett, and Rio Blanco. So our membership is really all of these Rocky Mountain producing states and tribal nations. And we continue to look to increase our membership such that we can be a good, strong advocate for a regional energy plan for the Western United States. The framework for our conversation really does come back down to a Western Governors Association policy resolution. And if you think about Western Governors Association, you think of Oregon, you think of Washington, you think of California, but you think of Wyoming and Utah and Colorado all came together and passed a policy resolution in 2018 talking about energy in the West. And one of the goals, the stated goals in this policy resolution, is to advance efficient environmental review, siting, and permitting processes that facilitate energy development. So we've got to push forward with environmental review, siting, and permitting processes such that we can continue to foster energy development. I think that that's a real important point, that all governors in the Western states understand the need for energy development and the improvement and construction of additional infrastructure for the electric grid, for pipeline infrastructure, all doing so while ensuring environmental and natural resource protection. If you look at objective number 6, they talk about creating functional partnerships amongst states, federal agencies, tribal governments, and local jurisdictions to solve conflicts that hinder energy infrastructure and resource development. So at the end of the day, Western states and tribal nations, while not guided by this Western Governors Association policy resolution, is dedicated to what these governors have asked us to do, which is to facilitate responsible energy production for the Western United States. In doing as much, we've identified through a 2019 study that from Montana to the San Juan Basin, there's about 11.5 billion cubic feet of gas that's produced on a daily basis. And unfortunately, we continue to struggle with the notion that this gas could potentially get stranded in the coming years unless we take a strong advocacy position for promoting Rocky Mountain natural gas. And it really does almost become competitive. The Rocky Mountains are in competition, from my perspective, with the Permian for delivering gas, whether it be for hydrogen production or internal United States consumption, export to Mexico, or export to Asia. And so what we have to do as natural gas production basins across the Rocky Mountains is really come together and tell the story about the responsible production of our gas and the suitability for our gas to be used on a global stage. In doing as much, we had originally focused on Jordan Cove as an export facility out of the state of Oregon, and that project has now been put on hold. But there is another project that met final investment decision in 2020 for phase 1, which is the Energía Costa Azul project, which is located in Baja California, Mexico. And so we've been working with the owner of Energía Costa Azul, Sempra, and really working with them to identify the advantages that Rocky Mountain natural gas has over other natural gas supplies that they might be looking at. Clearly, we have identified that we've got ample supply, both in potential and proven reserves, as well as the production that we've got. If you think about it, that we're producing 11.5 BCF today, the opportunity to be exporting significant amounts of gas off the West Coast of North America to Asia, it's a real opportunity for us to find new markets for that gas that we're producing. Secondarily, a couple of the states in the West have some pretty unique bonding authority. For instance, New Mexico has a very unique law that allows us to take federal highway dollars and use those federal highway dollars for bonding for natural gas pipelines. That's very, very unique for the state of New Mexico. And so when looking at getting gas from the Rocky Mountains to Energía Costa Azul, there is the likelihood that we could be talking about some new transportation, some new midstream that's going to be required. And so providing some securitization through bonding authority is a huge advantage that the Rocky Mountains have. In addition, we have existing pipelines and right-of-ways. And I think, as we all know, as participants in your very informative seminars, Jerry, that the likelihood is that right-of-ways are going to be a very high commodity across the Western U.S. As getting a new right-of-way is likely not going to be a very easy proposition. And so utilizing existing right-of-ways to either upscale or add to existing pipelines is also an additional opportunity that the Rocky Mountains have. And then, of course, reduced geopolitical risk, because we're not going through any trade canals to get from Western North America over to Asia. In looking at the San Juan Basin and the Rockies, another advantage that we have is the fact that we are experts at producing natural gas. It is what we do. It is our job, as opposed to the Permian, where they have a significant amount of associated gas. And so the Rocky Mountains have the ability to go to the customer, to Sempra, and say, this is the job that we do, and we can do it based upon your demand day in and day out, regardless of what happens to oil. As opposed to the Permian, when oil shuts down, as it did in 2020, then the associated gas shuts down as well. And so there's a threat to the supply. So that's just another advantage that the Rocky Mountains have over the Permian in delivering to Energía Costa Azul. So what does Energía Costa Azul want? What does Sempra really want in sourcing gas for their LNG export facility? What they would like is they would like strong balance sheets for a long-term deal. And just to be very honest with you, Jerry, and with the audience, the past 10, 15 years has been very difficult on natural gas producers across the Rocky Mountains. And our balance sheets are not as strong as they once were. And of course, the majors and the super majors have opted to move out of these areas in large part. And so there are concerns about our balance sheets, but we need to take that as an opportunity for proving up to this end user about what it is that we're able to deliver on their behalf. Additionally, an opportunity or concern is pipeline capacity. At the end of the day, when phase 2 of Energía Costa Azul gets put into place, in I think 2028 is when they're talking, they want a dedicated 2 BCF a day in delivery capacity. And they don't want that to be shared on any other midstream. They want a dedicated 2 BCF a day. Now that's a challenge, but yet at the same time, it's an opportunity. If we think about the Rocky Mountains currently producing 11.5, and then you add another 2 BCF of demand to that in theory could increase Rocky Mountain demand by 15 to 20% for the gas that we're producing. Those are large numbers. Jerry, you talked about putting people back to work. We're in the process of doing an economic study to prove out what this 15 to 20% would mean for communities that have just been economically ravaged really since nat gas prices collapsed in October of 2008. The other thing that Sempra has really pushed for us, and you highlighted on it, Jerry, is that it's a new world out there by way of demand for fuel. And the French energy company turning around an LNG tanker last year because it was dirty natural gas from the United States. It was fracked natural gas, heaven forbid. What was a wake-up call to many LNG exporters that in order for their product, their commodity to be valuable on a global market, they're going to have to prove out that it's developed with ESG in mind, and that we're doing everything that we can to make it the most environmentally friendly, if you will, gas that's produced across the United States, which, of course, as I said, we are. We know that we produce gas in a much more sustainable and environmentally responsible manner, but at the end of the day, we've got to prove it out that that we're doing things in that way. So Western states and tribal nations have looked at several initiatives to prove out the value and the marketability of Western Rocky Mountain natural gas. The first is methane rules being used as a backdrop of success. Both Colorado and New Mexico. Colorado's have been put into place. New Mexico is on its way. The Oil Conservation Division has passed their ruling, and the Environment Department it is quick to come. And at the end of the day, methane mitigation and capture, according to the exporters, methane mitigation and capture will be the price of admission for any natural gas supplier on a global market. So I like to think of this as a special little bonus for the San Juan Basin. I know that it's going to take some money to push forward some remediation, but by having the rules in place, it makes our gas more marketable. I think that you've seen companies like Jonah Energy in Wyoming recognize the same thing, where they're getting a premium for their coal seam gas because it's not fracked. This is, whether we agree with it or not, it's a reality of the marketplace. And at the end of the day, a premium will be paid on gas that is produced where methane capture rules are in place. That's a bonus for the San Juan over the Permian if you're thinking about this being a true competition for who can get their gas to market quickest and with a good long-term contract. Secondarily, Western States and Tribal Nations is working with San Juan College to build an ESG certification proposal. So at the end of the day, as I've said several times here, Jerry, we know that we're producing gas in a responsible way. And really what we need to do is, for lack of better terms, put the good housekeeping seal of approval on it and prove out that we are doing what we need to be doing in the production of this gas. And so we've now moved forward with building standards for ESG certified natural gas. And then the idea is to take displaced workers here in the San Juan Basin and incorporate those standards and have them assist operating companies throughout the Rocky Mountains on what their footprint looks like, and then to offer advice to those operating companies on minor tweaks that they could do so that they could get that certification and ultimately make their gas, as well as gas across the Rockies, more valuable. Finally, what Western States and Tribal Nations has done, we just released in the past week a greenhouse gas emissions study. And the study proves out definitively that LNG sourced from 11 different basins across the Rocky Mountains, including Green River, Uinta, Piceance, the San Juan, all spanning Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, that our gas, if used to replace coal-fired energy across Asia, that we would reduce what Rocky Mountain natural gas exported if used for electrical production in Asia, would reduce life cycle emissions from 42 to 55% across Asia, an average of 40% reduction in greenhouse gas life cycle emissions. And that takes into account every action that we do, really from drilling the well to exporting to putting into work in Asia. So at the end of the day, the pitch from us is that using North American Rocky Mountain natural gas for export is not only a good thing for our economies across the Rocky Mountains, but it's a good thing for environmental protections across the globe. And that is a message that is very, very interesting to a new administration, where you have the likes of folks like John Kerry who are working to reduce global emissions. And we've been able to prove out scientifically in a peer-reviewed study that in fact, Rocky Mountain natural gas can do as much.
So could I jump in with a question here?
Sure, absolutely, Jerry.
Have you guys reached out to Kinder Morgan, some commercial outfits which move a lot of gas, Enterprise Field Services? I know the state of Colorado, were they in the Weston and they jumped out with Polis? Is that what happened? And what kind of budget do you guys have to keep this thing going? Kind of put a mouthful there.
Yeah, so
you have a staff person there, a couple staff people?
We do. So the president of the organization is a full-time staffer, and he brings a team forward with him, a comms team, as well as some advisors. But I think to the question about getting Kinder Morgan and Enterprise and other folks on board, we've just recently as a board decided that we were going to engage in another study identifying the infrastructure resources that are available to the Rocky Mountains to transport gas across the Western United States. And not only looking at this 2 BCF, but also looking at a newfound interest in hydrogen and hydrogen delivery. And so Western States is not only now focused on liquefied natural gas exports, but we're also looking at United States consumption of natural gas and how is it that we're able to increase that consumption. And hydrogen is most definitely the new hot button topic. And the beauty of hydrogen is that, you know, when we're looking at blue hydrogen, it consumes nat gas as the feedstock, but then we can produce carbon-free electricity with it. And California seems to think that that's okay. And, you know, Jerry, in the service industry, I've always believed that the customer is always right. So if California wants hydrogen-produced electricity, and we can generate it using San Juan natural gas, and then transport that electricity over existing lines, then that's what we're going to be doing. And so Weston has begun to focus on partnering with hydrogen producers. And this slide was actually stolen from, I'll give credit where credit is due, stolen from a private business by the name of Libertad that is looking to build a hydrogen demonstration project here in the San Juan. But at the end of the day, it displays that we're able to take fugitive methane emissions, or even just methane from produced natural gas, produce hydrogen, and then turn that hydrogen into utility scale power generation or low carbon fuels. And if you look all the way over on the right-hand side of that slide where it says hydrogen transport and storage, we think a game changer is to blend hydrogen and nat gas in existing pipeline infrastructure to then make our gas even that much more attractive for export. And so we're working with Sandia National Labs and others to prove out what the possibilities are for this new hydrogen economy, which we think is imminent. Looking at the projects for hydrogen here in the San Juan Basin, at least, we've got the Libertad project that I just spoke about, which is a scalable project. Talked about Sandia National Labs and their High Blend project and what it is that they're able to do to blend nat gas and hydrogen and deliver it both for industrial uses, fuel consumption, but then even into residential uses as well. We're looking at in between 20 and 30% blending possibilities right now. And then, of course, there's also Big Navajo and the Bayotech project, where they're looking at redirecting Navajo Nation flared methane to a production facility to produce low carbon hydrogen for use in zero emission transportation and power production. So those are a couple of the hydrogen projects that we're watching from a community perspective, because again, the production of hydrogen will assist in the consumption of nat gas. The other project to talk about that's local that we've got our eye on just from an organization perspective is the Coyote Clean Power Project, which is a partnership between 8 Rivers and the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, where they're looking at producing 280 megawatts of clean power, and then doing a CO2 capture project with that as well. So the point of all of this, without going too deep into it, is that there are significant movements in the San Juan Basin and across the Rocky Mountains to quote unquote green up our gas, which then ultimately, if you're looking on a global market, then makes San Juan and Rocky Mountain natural gas that much more valuable to an Asian marketplace and across the globe. And I think that it's really important work for us to be doing. And industry is leading this charge. This is not something that's being forced upon us by the government. It's something that we recognize provides opportunities for us. So in wrapping up this presentation, Jerry, so what I see is the next step or next steps for Western states and tribal nations and for Rocky Mountain and San Juan natural gas is one, pushing forward the support for the ESG certified responsibly produced natural gas program. We think that that's going to be huge, where we're able to prove out where we're putting our money where our mouth is. And then secondarily, driving support for West Coast LNG export opportunities, specifically the Sempra Energia Costa Azul project. And then there's a host of other political next steps where we're asking for New Mexico's governor to call together the primary actors for New Mexico plan development, energy plan development, and promoting blue hydrogen and bonding securitization in the state of New Mexico. But then there's also an Office of Interstate Natural Gas Markets that's been on the books in the state, which is dedicated to an export role in how is it that we can push for export of New Mexico natural gas. And so asking for that office to be staffed so that then we can begin an official communication between the state of New Mexico and Mexico. Additionally, it's worthwhile to mention that President Biden's infrastructure bill that's currently being considered or negotiated, I think is the better way to put it. We have strong indications that there will likely be a dedication of 15 hydrogen development programs that will be funded in that infrastructure bill. And those programs will be focused on economically disadvantaged communities. So the idea is to take communities that have been impacted by the closure of coal mines and other economic difficulties, and then invest in those communities, pushing for a blue hydrogen demonstration projects. And so that is something that Western states and tribal nations is working with a number of federal officials, both in Congress as well as the Department of Energy, to push under the auspices of, again, consumption of nat gas that's responsibly produced will be a boon for our economics. And then finally, looking at some regional suggestions on how it is that we can build out a regional energy corridor for pipelines as well as electrical transmission. So there's a lot going on, Jerry, here at Western States and Tribal Nations, and all under the auspices of what is it that we can do to improve consumption and tell the story about Rocky Mountain natural gas and how it's produced and create some new markets for it.
Well, we need our story told, that's for sure. And I've got a couple of questions coming in here on the project. First of all, I wanted to ask, what's the background of your president? What's his name and where is he based? And you said he has a comm staff, or there was something like that.
Yes. I'll just, if I can take them one by one, that would be great. So his name is Andrew Browning. He is located in Denver. He works with a larger firm named HBW, who has offices across the United States. He's formerly a Department of Energy employee who has moved more into the advocacy side of work. And so we've got the power of that entire firm behind us as we push our story forward.
Are they working on trying to get Colorado to rejoin the group, or was Colorado ever a member?
So thank you again for that question. I apologize that I didn't answer it early. So Governor Hickenlooper was one of the founding members, along with the governor of Utah, of Western States and Tribal Nations. And then when Polis joined, they officially withdrew their support. And that's when the 4 energy producing counties joined the organization. And we are having conversations with now Senator Hickenlooper on advice on how it is that we can get Colorado back into the fold in working with this organization.
So a couple of people had some really good questions on the build cost for the Azul project, the pipeline network costs. I'm going to kind of put this all in one. Will California approve the pipelines? What are your current obstacles to Azul, and how much momentum does the project actually have? You say 2028. What's your guess on timing? And I think it was 2028 is what you had. And then a really good question here. Is there a risk that our natural gas will be rejected going to China because it is dirty due to fracking? Could the global climate change movement try a backdoor ban on U.S. fracking? And I know I look at education, and that's really what we're all about. Is there any education going on fracked gas? Because, quite frankly, I'm guessing 70 or 80% of the volumes you drill are probably fracked, right?
Yeah.
What the heck? I mean, does this guy Andrew Browning know a frack from a Fruitland well, a Mancus well from a Fruitland well, and does he care? I mean, what the heck? So I kind of threw a lot out there, Jason, and I know you're good at handling my inquiries and from the other callers on the show here on the webinar.
Okay, I'll try and run through them and cover them, and then Jerry, all great questions, long discussions behind each of them.
Yeah, we could go for, a couple hours on this. Yeah.
If I don't do it justice, then feel free.
No, I know. Well, we could continue the conversation, but I think what you're doing is really fabulous.
So let's start with California. It's Western states and tribal nations and the people that we work with recognize the difficulties of getting anything done in the state of California. And we would be working to utilize existing pipeline right-of-way and existing pipe that's in the ground, staying out of the state of California. So that is something that we recognize and that we're focused on. There are a couple of pipeline routes that really go from the Uinta or in the San Juan and to Mexico without getting through California. And that's the need that we have in pushing forward in a transportation study right now. And our next order of business is to get that done. I am no midstream expert, and we are looking for midstream experts to come and advise us. So that's kind of the first answer about California. Costs of a pipeline way outside of my scope. I just really don't have any idea, but we would look to be identifying that as we're moving forward. Momentum. Costa Azul was the only LNG export facility that received FID in 2020 for phase one. They are currently moving forward with half a B a day. And it's my understanding that there's a mix of gas that's going to be feeding to that facility, somewhere in the range of about 25% San Juan and 75% Permian. I believe that the conversations that we've had as an organization with Sempra and others, both from a governmental as well as a business perspective, that we have a lot of momentum and wind in our sails. I see many more opportunities than I do challenges, but it's going to take all of us working together for this to work. Because I think the easy answer is the Permian. And the more difficult answer is to work collaboratively to deliver Rocky Mountain natural gas. But I'm excited, to tell you the truth, Jerry, about where we're at and what it is that we can do. I'm going to take your last question next, which was around educating people about fracking and whether or not fracking, whether or not Andrew knows what a frack is. I can guarantee you Andrew knows what a frack is. I can tell you I definitely know what a frack is. And we don't see that fracking right now is really the challenge. We see some of the NGOs pushing around air regulations and produced water regulations that they're trying to attack other aspects of our industry in an effort to shut us down. I think that there's enough people who have said that fracturing to deliver energy resources is an acceptable way for us to move forward. And at the end of the day, that's what energy independence in the United States is dependent upon. And I think that there's strong political support for doing as much. But then the final question that I wrote down was, what's the risk about NGOs doing an end around and a backdoor run on trying to shut down exports? And I think that risk is real. Not only do we have our report that identifies that we can reduce global greenhouse emissions by 40% in Asia by exporting Rocky Mountain natural gas. The first thing that the NGOs did yesterday in a newspaper article was come back around and try to say, but if you use natural gas, then renewables won't be able to be used. And so therefore, it's a bad deal for us to use natural gas. Now, this is almost becoming cliche, but what we all know is that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And what California taught us in the summer of 2020 is that there are not enough battery resources to be able to sustain communities who are experiencing blackouts or extreme electricity needs. I think it's very clear that we need a fuel, both in the United States as well as across the globe, to support renewables. I think everybody on this call knows that renewables are not going to be able to power our globe anytime in the near future, if ever. And so nat gas and hydrogen are most definitely the fuel that should be chosen. And yes, I think that there's a full-on assault and onslaught of folks that want to stick their head in the sand and keep energy in the ground. But we're here to tell folks the truth that you need United States Rocky Mountain produced natural gas in order to be able to make the energy mix work.
You guys have a plan to address the potential? What's that?
I said that's my soapbox, Jerry.
Okay. Do you have a plan to address the potential allegations of the Keep It in the Ground movement that certified methane is merely greenwashing, and that all the hydrocarbon production should simply be shut in and banned? What kind of response do you guys have for that?
Well, I think that the response is very clear through the study that was produced that identifies that natural gas is good for the globe, right? So, we engaged in a peer-reviewed professional study that is scientifically proven out. It's not just me out talking about it. It was something that was heavily researched and has data to back it up. And the fact of the matter is that I don't think any reasonable person engaged in this conversation believes that a keep it in the ground attitude is something that's realistic. And so, we started off the conversation, Jerry, talking about the fringes. That keep it in the ground movement is really about the fringes rather than trying to look for solutions.
Well, we've got some project we're doing, and the federal leases have expired. So we have to form a unit where we're drilling around these federal tracks that probably won't come up for leasing again. I didn't have time to cover this on the from my notes here, but I mean, that's the scary part. They'll keep some of it in the ground, which may keep a lot of it in the ground. I mean, we know there are those parts of the basin, and there are those parts of the West where these NGOs are adamant about it. Finally, let's wrap up with this. Can you briefly give a recap of why the San Juan and Rockies can be marketed as clean gas, such as chemical makeup and any thresholds that may need to be met for certain components to be classified as clean? I think this is a good wrap-up question.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the first piece is talking about methane capture and how the San Juan Basin, being perfectly situated between Colorado and New Mexico, has an immediate answer on responsibly produced gas. That specific to any of the science that's out there around whether our gas is cleaner from a molecule perspective is really outside of my pay grade. But I would really encourage folks to download our report, and I can send a link through the chat here shortly that identifies all of that science. and it compares that science to Canadian produced natural gas. And because the same researcher did a study for Canada as well as for the Rockies. And so you can take that comparative analysis and draw some conclusions. And then, you know, once we go through that report, I would encourage folks to get a hold of myself, get a hold of Andrew, and continue this conversation as we're moving forward, because things are happening very, very rapidly. And we really need all producers and operators across the Rockies to get onto a real similar page about how it is that we can advocate for our product and not result in stranded gas left in the Rockies. That would be the worst for all of us. So.
Right. We sure don't want to have that, or strand. And I talk about stranded leases.
Yeah.
We talk about that. So, well, very good.
We've got a good executive summary that can be reviewed. And then if you want to get into the science, we have that as available as well. And I'll work on getting that link brought up here, Jay.
Yeah, what I'll do is you can put that in the chat box, or we can, on our follow-up email, I can send that to our callers, people sitting in on the call here. So that'd be great. Well, I'll definitely introduce myself to Mr. Browning. He gets, maybe you could send me his info. I'll go knock on his door if he's still able to do that. And I'm here in Denver, obviously. So he'll get to meet a San Juan producer, and we can maybe take a couple others of us over there to meet with him. I mean, I think, one thing I know for sure is that New Mexico has 0 interconnects with Mexico. Arizona has 4, California has a couple, and Texas has about 15. So I think that would be a huge goal, is to get an interconnect with Mexico with a pipeline that can help not only for export, but for the ECA you talk about. So
yeah,
really,
you're right. I mean, our focus is Arizona. I mean, it very clearly is the pathway to accomplish our goal, and really where we're at now is having to produce that study to identify what resources are available.
Well, very good. So, well, I really appreciate your time, Jason. Very excellent. Thank you, Lori Walters, behind the scene putting things up. We don't have anything scheduled for next month, but I've invited several people to join us, but maybe we can continue our discussion, because I had a whole bunch of questions on federal leases and impact of some of the methane rules in the state of New Mexico, how that affects small producers and things like that. We are going to have a prospect IQ in the next couple of weeks on gas. San Juan Resources, we have anywhere from 16 to 19 BCF type wells to drill in the Carson Forest on a project we have. So we'll have a prospect IQ on that coming up. And again, thanks very much, Jason, for all your time here. And we'll stay in touch and encourage everybody to be advocates for this fabulous business that we're in. No, it's no secret that I'm an advocate for the San Juan Basin and oil and gas business. So I think we've made this world what it is with what we've been able to produce and create and modernize our society. So we'll keep it up. Any final words, Jason?
No, Jerry, I just, as always, appreciate the work that you're doing in highlighting the opportunities that exist inside of the San Juan Basin. And I really appreciate the participants today coming and listening to me kind of blather on about some of this work that I'm doing, but I'm hopeful that we can come together as an industry and increase the demand for our product.
Well, good. Well, a lot of the questioners on my Q&A, thank you very much for your time and in your efforts. So want to give you encouragement in that, and we really, really appreciate everything. So that's all for now. We'll see you next month, July 21st, Tuesday, 9 a.m.